So if you're a regular listener to the KrakCast, you know that from time to time, we like to bring in people who actually know what they're talking about, unlike myself and Dr. Mike and Dave and Josh. And it's especially true today since we're talking about the world of video games in Poland and Poland's place in the global gaming industry. Our guest is a technology enthusiast, is a major video game fan, and he's got experience working in the industry, very knowledgeable about the design, production, and business side of video games. Marcin Kasz. Marcin, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. Just coincidentally, we're recording this episode just about a week after Keanu Reeves was in the news for reasons that are kind of connected with what we're talking about today. For the benefit of anybody listening who doesn't know the connection between Keanu Reeves and Poland and video games, why don't you explain why he was in the news?
I'm supposed to explain?
Yeah, you.
Okay. So
shoot.
So last week on, I believe, Sunday, there was a conference, the largest video game conference on the planet called E3. It's short for Electronic Entertainment Expo. And each year, all the brands, the largest companies in the video game industry, show up in Los Angeles and each one of them have conferences, separate ones. On Tuesday last week, Xbox had their conference, and the way it works is usually they announce either a new piece of hardware or different new games, titles, exclusives as they call it. And one of the games showcased was Cyberpunk 2077, which is the new title coming from CD Projekt Red, which is a Polish studio. And they revealed that Keanu Reeves is going to have one of the main roles in the video game. And, it was kept secret until that point. So he showed up on stage, and now it's a meme.
Yeah, kind of a big deal. Keanu Reeves is a big major movie star. CD Projekt, I'm going to use the English pronunciation, by the way. CD Projekt Red is a big player suddenly on the back of the success of The Witcher that we'll get to in just a second. And so it was, in this world of video games and kind of pop culture stuff, it was, kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal because if you think about it, Keanu Reeves is the most cyberpunk ish or the most cyberpunk actor I can at least imagine. I don't know who else could be more who had other roles as him.
So you think he's a good fit?
I mean, it's perfect. It's basically Neo, John Wick with a metal arm. So everybody's gonna love it.
Johnny Mnemonic, and he's also and he's also kind of just weird.
I saw this meme on Facebook the other day where apparently his character's name in Cyberpunk is going to be Johnny something. His name is always John. Everywhere he goes, it's true. John. It's really
Johnny
weird,
Silverhand, which is it's a very well-known character in the Cyberpunk universe. So yeah.
Well, CD Projekt Red kind of serves as a good jumping-off point for our discussion here. Again, for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know, that's the studio behind the Witcher game series, which kind of reached stratospheric levels with the success of Witcher 3. What, 2016, 2015? What year was that released?
2015. May 2015.
So it became a major, major success globally, not just in Poland. I mean, it's a big deal everywhere. Of course, the Witcher series based on the works of the Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski. Is that right?
Correct.
Marcin, CD Projekt Red, without a doubt, in terms of valuation, the biggest Polish studio there is now.
Correct. So last week they broke records. I believe they're now valued in 22 billion Polish zlotys, which it's I think the eighth most valuable company in Poland, and I'm not entirely sure, but they're more valuable than Orlen at this point.
That's crazy. Like the oil company, Orlen.
Yes, exactly. The petrol station. They're huge. They're huge. But still, this compared to the whole industry, they're still kind of tiny. The industry, the global video game industry, is worth $150 billion, and it's growing at a very rapid pace. So every year there's a 15% increase in the value of the whole industry. The Polish industry also is kind of dwarfed by the size of the whole global one. The Polish industry is valued at around $500 million, which is tiny compared to, let's say the US, 25 billion. Japan is 12 billion. China, 27 billion. So, we're still getting there. But for Polish standards, it's unbelievably large.
The success of CD Projekt Red, is it kind of a combination of skill and luck, or what do you put down their incredible valuation? What's the secret of their success, so to speak, so far?
CD Projekt isn't the only company in the industry that's making very good titles, very good games. There are other companies like Techland or
Techland behind the Dying Light series, I think.
The Dying Light series. They have a new game coming out, Dying Light 2, and it was also featured in the Xbox conference. Actually, it's
and on that
Xbox
note,
seems to be like promoting Polish companies, Polish titles a lot.
Bet that conference also featured air conditioning.
unlike our recording studio, but that's okay. I know we're jumping all over the place here, and that's fine. But going back to E3, I forgot how many games were presented, but weren't there actually 3 games presented that had a Polish connection?
I remember 3. I read somewhere there were 6. Actually, no, there were 3 during the conference, and now 6 Polish games are in the top 10 or top 20 on the Steam platform. So the Steam is a digital video game platform. You can purchase big games online for your PC. And now 6 Polish games are in the top 10 or top 20. I forget.
That's impressive.
It's very impressive. That's, we are known for very good video games. And I think there are a couple of things at play here. A couple of things. In my opinion, one of the reasons is that we have a very strong computer culture here in Poland. So we have, in general, we have very good developers. Like, we're known for having just good, good developers. The other thing is that in the 80s, when you could barely buy anything, you could only buy like vinegar in stores. Many people had computers at home. They would have an Atari system or an Amiga, Commodore, and other computers. So people started learning how to program in the 80s, and a lot of these guys, like there's another well-known Polish video game maker called Andrzej Chmielarz. He actually started in the 80s. They started around the same time as other Western developers. So we were learning the craft along these other countries or like other cultures. So it's a combination of different things. And then of course, when the transformation happened in the 89, so it just blew up. And many of the Polish video games that actually started as a distribution. They started in distribution, like CD Projekt, for example. They, which is kind of strange because they started in distribution in 94, but before 94, they already sold games, but it was totally illegal. Or actually, it was legal at the time because copyrights didn't exist in Poland at all.
It was a real kind of a relaxed interpretation of copyright.
It's the Wild West in the Eastern Europe.
Yes. You could just go to I don't know how to call it, flea market.
Like an outdoor flea market. Yeah,
like a flea market, and just buy a piece of software or a video game or a movie, any album you could think of from like a van. Or like a guy that, I don't know, he never had. We talked about this like a few days ago.
Yeah, you could buy stuff for like $3.
Where was the one in Krakow again? Was it?
It's in Branowice. I think it's still there.
Branowice Street,
Baliska, but I haven't been there.
That's where I bought a copy of Office 2010 for like $3.
I mean, what's killed
perfectly, by the way.
right now is nobody's buying pirated programs there anymore because you can download everything right now.
Sorry, you can share, Mike. You can share.
You can download everything, but what CD Projekt did is that once the copyright law was established in 1994, they started officially legally distributing games in Poland. The other thing, they started localizing all these games. So the first game that they actually localized was Ace Ventura.
Polish language.
And yes, Ace Ventura.
What a start.
And that was one of, I actually saw an American interview with Marcin Iwiński, who is the CEO of the company. They asked him, how do you say "alrighty then" in Polish? And he didn't know, which is like, that would be the number one thing that I would remember.
What did they call it? Well, I bet they ruined the name as well.
I have no idea how they
Ace
say it.
Ventura, Investigator of Pets.
What really, what jump started the whole business for them was that they localized a game called Baldur's Gate, which I don't know if you guys.
I've even heard of Baldur's Gate. Yeah.
Oh, you've heard about these. Okay, so it's a very well-known game. It's a very popular game. It's an RPG, and I think they actually localized it a few months after, or a long time after it was released in the West. But they almost did like a collector's version for the Polish market, and they expected to sell around 3,000 units that year, and I think they sold like 50 or 80,000 units. So that's really how they jump-started the business. So before they actually started making games, they already had a well-functioning business, and they were selling video games, distributing all these Western games, and they had connections in the industry. And the same goes for other companies like Techland, for example. Marchewka, the guy who actually runs the company, the same story. He started with distribution, then moved on to production. He wanted to sell his own games. And I think one thing that they did well, they realized that if they're not going to make a good game, nobody's going to buy it. Actually,
Good point.
yeah.
So these are not overnight success stories. I mean, their success today is the product of the years, decades actually,
Correct.
of, as you say, making connections, having a presence in the industry, and kind of learning it as the industry grew in Poland. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I read somewhere that actually it took them. So they started making the first Witcher. I'm talking about CG Projekt here. I think in 1999, it took him 6 years to actually finish the game. And they couldn't find a publisher. They pitched to dozens of publishers. Nobody wanted to actually distribute the game in the Western part of the world because it was a first-time studio. Nobody knew them. Nobody heard of Witcher. Sapkowski was he wasn't a known author at the time. So it was really hard for them, I guess. So,
I'm guessing the first movie that came out didn't help either. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was terrible.
Oh god.
And like the Mortal
That was a
Kombat
series,
movie.
right? That wasn't a movie. Like that was a TV show.
No, it was the movie. What you mean? That was the first
but
movie.
they made a TV show out of it afterwards. I mean,
God, I think I blocked that out.
You're talking about the movie with what's the actor's name? That one guy.
Zabrowski.
Yeah, Zabrowski. That's it, exactly.
Yeah, Zabrowski.
I remember when that came out. It didn't look very good.
Yeah, and speaking of movies, like coming back to the value of the whole industry. So currently, the whole video game industry is valued at $150 billion. So comparing to the movie market or the movie industry, the movies are worth $40 billion. Right.
I'm really glad you set me up that way, Marcin. It's the perfect segue to some statistics. Yes, I actually did some research last night for this.
Really?
I want to share some stats. It's interesting to me how many people are not really aware of the size of the video game industry and how it compares to Hollywood. We always read about the opening weekend of some blockbuster and how quickly they make $100 million, $1 billion, or whatever. But there are any number of games that kind of make those numbers out of Hollywood look like a joke. Listen to this. I'm reading from my laptop now, if it sounds like I'm reading. The highest grossing movie ever is now Avengers Endgame, the recent Avengers, right? It made $357 million on its opening weekend. $357 million. GTA 5 in 2013, 6 years ago, it made $815 million in 24 hours. It made $1 billion in 2 days. It took the Avengers 5 days to make $1 billion.
Wouldn't it be pre-orders still going back ages for they were waiting on for
I'm sure that's part of it, but still, Star Wars, the entire Star Wars franchise. How many Star Wars movies are there now? Like 9? I stopped counting. Like 9,
17,
9. No, wait, there are 8 in the.
I don't even care anymore about Star Wars, to be honest.
This is turning into Star Wars.
Anyway, the entire Star Wars franchise in its history has grossed about $10 billion.
The Ewok movie.
History of Star Wars.
10.
There are 15 video game franchises that have grossed more than Star Wars. 15. All the James Bond movies together, going back to 1961, 1960, Dr. No? All the James Bond movies together, $8 billion, which is less than League of Legends has made in the last 9 years. Last stat, Fortnite, which is familiar to many of you listening, I'm sure. Fortnite, released less than 2 years ago, has made more money than every movie ever made, except for 2, Avatar and Avengers Endgame. Fortnite, more money than any movie ever in less than 2 years.
And that's a free game.
They made their money through microtransactions and little upgrades, freemium model and things like
That's
this.
one of the things that actually makes the whole industry more lucrative, if that's how I can call it. 91% of all sales in the industry are made online.
So no middleman, basically.
Basically, yes. So
Fewer middlemen. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about like 130 or $40 billion made entirely online.
Let me bring this back to the Polish connection. Okay, the industry is huge, lots of money out there, but can you identify any factors, apart from what you mentioned about the computer culture here?
Yeah.
Why today? Why are we seeing this success today? Why the money flowing into Polish game studios today? Is it a combination of different factors coming together, or can you put your finger on one or two things that are really contributing to why this is kind of broken through now?
Well, it hasn't broken, and now it's it's not an overnight success, as we've said before.
Oh, that's right. I think I said that like 2 minutes ago.
It happens.
things.
I mean, there are now.
Getting old.
I mean, officially now, the video game industry in Poland has been officially recognized as an important part of the how do you say it? The
economy.
The economy, exactly. So there are now subsidies, both from the European Union and from the government subsidies, that actually you can just get money to make games.
Nice. That's what the EU is for, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Not slagging it off now. They're making your beloved video games, John, are you?
There's a grant called Game In, double N at the end, and you can. I think it's €100 million grant fund that just. If you have a good idea and basically have a team and you can prove that you can make a game, you're gonna get just it's not enough to make a AAA title, but you can definitely make a mobile game with the money.
You have to have government team friendlies, like how a bill gets in.
I have no idea. I'm not
The worst game ever. Worst game ever. Before we get to mobile gaming, we talk about CD Projekt Red and Techland. There's Polish companies have grown organically here, but the success of the Polish game scene is also attracting foreign companies and foreign money looking to acquisitions.
That's true.
To help them get a foothold here. Can you give us some example of acquisitions and game studios, Polish game studios that have been acquired by giants from other countries?
Sure. So the company that I work for is currently called and was called People Can Fly, and they made a couple of good games in the past. They made one particular title was really popular. It was called Painkiller, which is an FPS. It's a shooter. And they also were hired by a company called Epic Games to make basically a port, which is basically it's moving a game from one system to another. So they were hired to port a game called Gears of War from Xbox 360 to the PC platform. And after that, they did a really good job, and they were bought by Epic Games. And I joined the company right after they were purchased by Epic Games. And I worked for another title in the Gears of War series. So that's one experience. That's one example. There are examples of Western companies, huge companies, opening their offices here in Poland, even in Kraków. So I don't know if you're familiar with a series called Call of Duty, for example, right? So there are actually multiple studios working on the series, but one of the better known ones is a studio called Infinity Ward. They actually have an office here in Kraków. It's a tech office or an R&D office, if you will. So they work on the graphics tech, on the game, on the graphics engine, and things like this. So these are just two examples. But also the other thing is that because we're making really good games here, it attracts a lot of talent as well. So a lot of designers and well-known people from the industry, they just come over to Poland. They move to just work on these games. Yeah.
What's the name of there's a studio here in Krakow that is making a game based on the Blair Witch license that was also featured at E3. What's the name of that studio?
Bloober
Games. Bloober Team. Okay, Blair Witch, kind of 25 years after the movie.
Retro, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit retro.
And it's also making a lot of buzz in the news. Like they have a unique approach to the horror genre. They're using first person perspective. They have like a companion character, a dog that you walk around the forest with. It's super scary and it's very impressive graphically speaking as well. So, yeah.
Nothing really happens in that movie though. It's just like,
there's a lot of like jump scares, and
I think the game will be inspired by the movie, like that.
You'll be doing stuff though, right?
Yeah, I guess.
That's
walking a dog in the woods, maybe. I don't know.
The video games tend to. For me, video games are an evolution of the movie medium, if you will, it's the most evolved medium, in my opinion, because it gives you an interactive angle to the storytelling aspect, right? So if you read a book or watch a movie, it's just passive completely. You just enjoy the storyline. With video games, you can actually make the gamer feel different emotions, like guilt, for example. I felt guilty during playing a video game. That's an interesting thing.
I've killed plenty of hookers in GTA 5, and I feel guilt. I feel guilty every time. Well,
on the sidewalk, John.
you are for floor now.
My point is that, like, if they're making a Blair Witch game, I think they're going to come up with some interesting mechanics.
It's a great license to have, and I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Sure.
But,
that was 99, I think.
I think it was 90. Yeah, was it 99? Was it that
2
long
or 3
ago, really? Wow.
Blair Witches, right? Or
I think there was a sequel or 2 or 4. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Console games like your Gears of War and your Call of Duty, etc. They get a lot of attention in the mainstream because when you go to the shopping mall, you see PlayStation and Xbox everywhere. They're the ones who sponsor big sporting events. They're the ones with commercials on TV. But in fact, console gaming is not the biggest sector of the gaming market, is it?
No, it's mobile gaming. Definitely mobile gaming. So
on phones, basically.
In terms of the market size, it's half of the market is mobile video games.
So for your phone.
Yes. So we're talking about like your, what is it called? Bejeweled or
Candy Crush,
all these games.
Flash of whatever.
Can I get your professional opinion on this?
Yeah.
I downloaded Mortal Kombat once onto an iPad, and it was the most tragic experience of my life. Some games just cannot be translated without a joypad. I would have thought touchscreen
Maybe
is tricky.
It's not for everyone. That's actually an interesting thing because the majority of people that play video games on mobile devices are women and between 35 and 45 years of age. So it's, it's the Candy Crush, it's all these games like the cooking simulator that is made in Poland.
There's got to be a vacancy for a cats game then, hasn't surely?
I mean, there are thousands of games. I
think at a certain point, Candy Crush was making $300,000 a day in profit. Like
I think there was
a day.
It was more.
Oh,
but
maybe there's another zero missing. I have no idea.
So,
Per hour, yeah.
So the whole industry is growing at a very fast pace. It's 15% a year. The mobile video game industry's work is growing at 25% a year. And
that's massive.
And now it's the whole value is 50%. So that's like almost $80 billion. In just video games. Mobile games.
And there are ridiculously lucrative games that many people have never heard of. If you can get a decent game together and get it on the App Store,
yes,
you can have this incredible passive income, they call it these days, and stay off the radar of the media, but still make hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on a game that has a very hardcore following, right?
Correct. And now you mentioned Fortnite. Fortnite is actually played on mobile devices as well.
Sure.
And a big portion of the money that they make is on mobile devices. And it's actually even more interesting because it's one of the few games that allows for crossplay, where you play the same game, you can play it on the mobile device, and you're playing with someone online that's playing it on PC, on PS4, or any other platform.
You're sharing the same map, basically.
Do you think they should give Carlton from the Fresh Prince a few quid for his dance? Because I think that's awful the way they stole that.
I think he sued
It's an
them.
iconic 90s moment. He deserves a fucking check.
No, but
man.
he sued them.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
Yeah.
he should win.
Yeah, but he doesn't own the dance. The people who own the Fresh Prince own the dance, and he signed it away.
Quincy Jones will be cool about it. Don't worry.
Maybe. So, Marcin, what about the Polish or maybe the Krakow connection to mobile gaming? Who are the big names that we might know in terms of studios or games? And also, sorry, just to make my question even more complicated, let's throw in gambling applications in the world of mobile gaming, because Krakow is actually really big in this world. Who's it? William Hill is here in Krakow? Yeah.
William Hill. There's Yggdrasil, Huge Games, Game Desire. These are just a couple of names that make gambling games, but they're mostly... They make mobile gambling games, but they're mostly browser games, which is also a huge part of the game of the industry. And interesting enough, all these companies have offices on Malta.
I think for legal reasons, that's like Malta and Gibraltar are the sports gambling and online gaming centers of the world. Yeah,
I'll need to pull up my stats here. Let me just.
Oh, he's checking his laptop. Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't remember all of this stuff, Marcin? Come on.
Actually,
we gave you plenty of time to memorize everything.
Press a bit of kids.
It is. Yes.
I have to be honest. I'm not that big of a fan in terms of mobile games. So.
Okay.
But John, I have to say one thing. After this conversation, I think we really need to sit down and try to figure out how to make a KrakCast game.
There's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah.
What could the main gaming function be? Kind of like waiting for a funny moment and
cracking jokes at the right
cracking
time.
jokes.
Lots of swiping left. Yeah.
Time the interruption.
How about if you
interject?
It's the freemium model, and if you pay an extra $1, you can get air conditioning for the hosts in their studio so they don't melt to death. Oh my God, it's hot. Oh my gosh.
Marcin, I can't find anything. Sorry, you guys.
Don't worry about it. But the point is that there is this Polish connection to the gaming world also extends to very much to mobile gaming and to what's the proper PC term for gambling gaming? Like, because they call themselves the gaming industry.
They're very much part of the gaming industry.
What do we call it? Gambling games, or what is it called? Gaming games?
I call it gambling games.
It is gambling. Yeah.
Game face.
Yeah.
Gambling.
For sure. Yeah. Let's bring things back to Keanu Reeves for a second.
All right.
It's a big deal. He's famous. People are looking forward to it. I'm going to play the devil's advocate, which is what I do. I'm going to take.
Keanu did.
I'm going to take. I see what you did there. Boom. Boom. All right. That's it.
I've never gotten such a reaction to a movie reference.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We're done. That's it.
Drop the mic.
This is one of them movies where you had to try and act. It didn't go so well.
Yeah, good. Like when he did that horrible accent in the Frankenstein movie, or the Dracula. Sorry, Dracula.
I love Keanu
Oh my
Reeves. He's a
God, that was
minimalist.
terrible.
I can always edit it out if we don't want to keep
Oh,
the
that's
joke.
true too. Yeah. Anyway,
Point Break is a fucking masterpiece.
Anyway, Marcin.
R.I.P. Swayze.
Yes.
Here's my point. When I look through all the video games that have hired familiar Hollywood talent, it was either for a really bad game or it was to try to distract attention from the fact that it was a mediocre game. I think Kevin Spacey in Call of Duty, Kiefer Sutherland was also in Call of Duty. When has this ever worked? When has there ever been a successful marriage between a famous Hollywood face or voice and a video game? I can't think of a single example.
It's a fair point. Though.
Thank you.
But it's Call of Duty.
And, well,
Some would argue that the whole series is garbage.
hey, whoa, watch it there,
Let me
watch
say
it.
something about Call of Duty, right? A lot of friends I have play this game, and you get invited over, and they go online to play the little Chinese children. I've never seen anyone last longer than 12 seconds without getting their head blown off. What is the fucking appeal
Yeah,
of this?
it happens. It happens. But the game that I'm talking about.
I know what you're saying.
Give me Mario
but
Kart any day.
Wasn't Kevin Spacey just in cutscenes? I haven't played the game.
He was not a play. Yeah, he was in cuts. He was like the evil mastermind of something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But Kiefer Sutherland. Sorry, Kiefer Sutherland was in the one where I think I was saving Asia from the Japanese or something. I was killing all the Japanese, and Kiefer Sutherland's shouting at me the whole time. And every time I hear his voice, I'm thinking, oh, it's Jack Bauer from 24.
Okay,
he's
well,
taking me out of my element. You know, it's like the.
I can give you other
I
examples.
see a downside in having a familiar
Good games,
face.
games that you like.
Okay.
That have
ahead.
GTA San Andreas. Samuel L. Jackson plays the
Okay,
cop.
yeah, bit rolls, but
Samuel L. Jackson is in it.
in GTA there's like 500 characters, and so
Yeah. I mean,
that's
so-
true.
So is that your way of saying
Yeah.
it
There's
wrong?
a lot of voice acting.
A little bit, okay, a
Main
little
character
bit.
is
Say
played.
it wrong, motherfucker!
The main character is played by Eddie Murphy.
That was a horrible Samuel L. Jackson, by the way.
I forgot his name.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's true. All the GTA's have certain rappers and some A-list talent. That's true. Okay.
No, but actually, the problem thing, I think the problem is when they try to create parts or characters just so the actor can be in the.
Well, that's
video
what I'm
game.
getting at. When you play Cyberpunk, you're
terms
going to be playing Keanu Reeves, not
Yeah,
like just
but
a
the
character.
was already there. It's a well-established character. So
Yeah, but it looks like him. It's modeled after him. It has
Yes,
his voice
yeah, that's
apparently.
true,
So
that's true.
I'm not.
I don't know, man.
I'm questioning
it's
it.
Cyberpunk. It's
And
CD Projekt.
in a bigger picture stuff, do you see this going back to CD Projekt Red? After building their success, all of their success on Witcher, they never made anything outside of the Witcher universe, right?
That's true.
That's true.
Yes.
That everything is Witcher. Is this a bold move to strike out in a new direction, or is this a risky move getting away from what made them successful to begin with? You know, going the cyberpunk direction.
Well, you know what? Making video games in general is a risky business because you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars into a game that's going to come out in 5 years, and you have to make that decision before you actually start developing it. So I would argue that, well, in terms of Cyberpunk, they did the exact same thing as with The Witcher. They basically bought an IP and just created a game around it. So with Cyberpunk, it's the same story. Cyberpunk is, if you don't know, it's a pen and paper RPG game from the 80s or 90s, created by a guy that I forgot. Of course, I forgot his name, but it's a well-known game basically. And this the fan base is there, the world is there, all the mechanics are practically created already. So I guess it's not really that big of a risk, in my opinion.
There's a pre-sold audience, in other words,
Correct.
people waiting for this to come out.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yes. Yeah. That's at least my opinion.
Well, we'll see. What's the release date for this? Early next year.
March 16th, 2020.
So call it 9 months, and we'll see who's right. It's going to be a success. I think it's just a question of to what degree it's going to be successful.
I'd just like to point out,
Go ahead.
that there are other Polish video game companies that are also releasing games. And the fact that we're just only talking about Cyberpunk doesn't mean that there are really good
Dying
games.
Light 2. I'm a big fan of Dying Light.
Light 2, there's a company called Farm 51 that is actually releasing a new game.
451. The temperature in this room right now, by the way, 451.
I can't name them all, but like there are just,
There's other stuff in the pipeline.
definitely.
Of course, you're talking console stuff or PC stuff or what? Because we don't.
I mostly play games on my console, which isn't. That's also a separate topic that we could talk about because
What's
that video games on consoles, or in general, consoles are not that popular here in Poland, and most players or most gamers play on PCs.
Okay.
And that was one of the points that I wanted to talk about. Why do we make video games in the first place, or like why do we make good games in the first place? Consoles were not a thing in Poland in the 90s. Like they didn't exist. The only
Sega Mega Drive.
Sega Mega,
What about Pegasus?
Pegasus. So that was the only thing that was actually popular in the 90s. So, in 92, 93, when people were playing SNES and Mega Drive and Genesis in the western part of the world, everybody here was playing either PC games or Pegasus, which is essentially an NES system.
Was this a financial thing, or what?
Pegasus, by the way, was basically a copyright breaking all the laws system.
for sure.
that you could
No
play.
Street Fighter, no Sonic the Hedgehog,
No,
no
nothing.
Mario Kart, no fucking Mario Kart.
Nothing like that. No, it wasn't as popular.
It was a difficult time in the history of this country.
And nope, I think the reason is that cartridges were hard to copy, right?
Yeah.
Right, so you had to buy them physically. Like you had to buy cartridges, and they were expensive to make, and the games were expensive at the time. So everybody was just copying them or buying them at the flea market. It was just like it was the norm. Like, why would you pay 100 zlotys for a game you can buy for 10?
You're wearing a PlayStation T-shirt, and when
Yes, I am.
I'll never forget my first encounter with the PS1, the
There
very
you go.
first PlayStation. We were all coming off Mega Drive, SNES's, Dreamcasts, and our first question when we got this new machine was not the Dreamcast, because that used this. Load time. Why is it loading again? I thought we'd conquered this problem. The cartridges just instantly loaded. How is that possible?
Well, that's supposed to be gone with the next generation of consoles,
Yeah, I
my
believe it when I
friends.
see it.
SSDs and all that.
SSDs, yes.
So, but is your point that there's a generation or two that kind of had their video game personality or their approach to this world kind of shaped by that era where they focus more on PCs rather than consoles?
Yes, definitely. Everybody, I think most people play video games on PCs here, and also it's shaped. So you have to get, sometimes you have to get creative to play a video game. Like if you couldn't buy it, you would have to download it or buy it from someone, and then have a crack or whatever.
By creative, you mean stealing, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Though in defense, I would like to mention that sometimes games just were not distributed here. The only
That's
way
true.
to get them was pirated.
That's true. Well, that's all I wanted to say. I'm not gonna.
All right. Well, I think on that note, it's a good time to wrap it up. Well, we're just scratching the surface. I think we need to come back to this topic some other
Yeah,
time.
so many more questions.
There's a lot to talk about.
Microphone about the questions.
Very big world. Marcin, thanks for taking the time to come in and chat with us about video games. We'll hope we come back another time, and we'll talk about Keanu Reeves or something else.
Turn the fucking fan on.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for listening. We're going to turn the fan on, so that's it. Thanks. Bye.